If your God demanded slaughter, would your faith make it holy, or would your hands just be bloody? Welcome. Today we're plunging into, well, a really unsettling question. Are some religions fundamentally violent?
It's a heavy one. It really forces you to look hard at the heart of belief itself.
Right.
Imagine just for a second taking any holy book and saying, okay, this is it. This is the only law now.
Wow. Yeah.
Suddenly those words, they aren't just ancient texts, are they? They're immediate. Chillingly so. Who gets called a saint and who's facing execution?
When you strip away all the interpretation.
Exactly. Raw text. Raw human nature. Doesn't that just stop you in your tracks?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I remember years back defending this religious text,
Yeah.
and it had verses in it that honestly they made my skin crawl. Ancient, brutal stuff. Divine anger.
And what did you do?
I waved it off. Oh, that's just metaphor, I said. That kind of youthful arrogance.
We've all been there, maybe?
But looking back, was I really digging for truth? Or was I just, desperate to fit in? To feel safe inside the group? How often do we all do that? Just skim past the really disturbing bits of what we say we believe, just to keep the peace, Keep things comfortable.
That self-censoring thing is fascinating. And maybe dangerous.
Yeah.
Because we see it everywhere, don't we? Preaching love, peace, compassion, often quoting from the same books that tell stories of, well, conquest, divinely ordered violence, wiping people out.
So what is that? Is it some kind of, high-level spiritual thinking? This ability to just box off these huge contradictions?
Or is it simpler? Is it just, cognitive dissonance on a massive scale, holding two completely opposing ideas at once, a kind of collective blind spot we choose, maybe unconsciously, just to keep our nice narrative going?
Right, because thinking about it too hard is uncomfortable.
So yeah, maybe that ability to compartmentalize isn't depth of faith. Maybe it's just a psychological trick to stay comfortable.
And this isn't just old history, is it? Stuff collecting dust.
No, not at all.
It's not some abstract theological debate for scholars. Holy war, God-approved violence. I mean, it's today's headline. It's a live stream you wish you hadn't seen. It's someone being radicalized right now. We tell ourselves we're past all that. So enlightened. But when someone says, God told me to do this, how much has really changed? How thin is that civilized layer we wear?
That's the nerve, isn't it? The one we have to touch. And think about this. What if the religions we see as, peaceful, what if they haven't really gotten rid of violence?
What do you mean?
What if they've just outsourced it? Maybe to the government, the state, or just pushed it way back into history so believers today can feel like they have clean hands.
Huh. Well, the same kind of outcomes happen, just differently.
Exactly. Which raises a huge question. Who's more responsible? The person who pulls the trigger, driven by faith, or the whole group, the whole system that maybe nods along or blesses it, even indirectly?
That's chilling. I saw something online, stuck with me. A kid, maybe 10, reciting scripture word for word, and using it to justify just pure, raw hatred for a group of people. And the really disturbing part, it wasn't just the hate itself, awful as it was.
What was it?
It was the kid's certainty. Just absolute, unwavering conviction. Almost innocent, the way they said these toxic things. That's what gets you, right? Not just the obvious monsters, but the true believers, armed with total righteousness.
Yeah. And that pushes us right up against that age-old question. Philosophers, thinkers like Socrates wrestled with this stuff. Where does this violence come from?
Is it baked into some religions, like part of the DNA?
Is religion just a tool, a really powerful, available tool that taps into things already inside us? Human violence, tribalism, wanting power. Religion gives it a justification, maybe.
It makes you rethink that old saying, religion is the opium of the masses. The thing that dulls the pain.
Right.
But sometimes, man, it feels less like opium and more like an amphetamine, doesn't it?
Ooh, interesting. Yeah.
Fueling not just dreams of heaven, but actual nightmares right here. Look at history. The Crusades, jihads, witch hunts. Horrifying. Were those really God's orders?
Or were they about land, resources, power, just wrapped up nicely in religious language to make it seem okay?
Exactly.
Which kind of forces us to look inwards, doesn't it?
Take a second, right now, whoever's listening. Think. Has there ever been a time, maybe religious, maybe not, when your beliefs made you feel just a little bit superior? When being right made it easier to just dismiss someone else's pain or their whole viewpoint, that tiny little spark of judgment, yes versus them. That's often where it starts, that dangerous path.
It's a really uncomfortable mirror, isn't it? Because we're so quick to point fingers at the extremists, the obvious ones.
Of course.
But have we ever used our own beliefs, maybe our enlightened secular beliefs, to just shut someone down, shame them? Is our own righteousness sometimes just a cleaner, quieter kind of holy war? We draw lines, but who ends up on the wrong side? It pushes you into these dark what-if places. Imagine, really imagine, hearing a voice, undeniable, divine, telling you to sacrifice your child. Test of faith.
Like Abraham.
Right. Would you be Abraham? Obedient? Or would your first thought be, I need a psychiatrist? Seriously. What does your gut reaction say about the God you believe in?
And look around now, today. How many conflicts boil down to religious claims? To land, identity, who gets to dominate?
So many.
If you peel back all the religious talk, the justifications,
Yeah.
what's left underneath, often it looks depressingly familiar, doesn't it? Power grabs, human conflict, like those tribal instincts Jung talked about.
And think about thou shalt not kill. Seems simple.
Yeah, pretty clear.
But then, the exceptions start creeping in, don't they? What about heretics? Infidels, people seen as a threat, are their loopholes. And the big one, who gets to decide? Who interprets God's law and says, okay, these people, it's okay to kill them?
And are we okay with humans having that power?
That's the question.
It rips you apart sometimes, doesn't it?
Okay.
You want peace. Interfaith harmony sounds great. You genuinely want understanding.
Of course.
But then you read some doctrines, some actual teachings that seem, well, dangerous, that
Yeah.
preach excluding people, maybe even harming them. Does seeing that danger make you intolerant?
Or is it just being aware, refusing to look away? Where is that line between tolerance and just letting bad things happen?
Yeah.
Complicity.
Where is it?
I heard a historian say something powerful once. Religions don't start violent.
Oh.
People make them violent. When it suits their fear, their greed, their hate, that flips the script, doesn't it?
It really does. So maybe the problem isn't the book itself,
Yeah.
the core ideas.
Or maybe it's less about the book and more about how people read it, how they twist it, picking the bits they like, ignoring the rest. It's like having a map, but then someone violently redraws the borders to grab more land.
And sometimes it's even weirder than that, right? Sometimes the most violent bits, the really brutal verses, those are the ones people cling to hardest.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe, because the world feels so chaotic and uncertain, those harsh rules offer kind of terrible certainty,
Right.
a sense of order, even if it's order built on fear. We crave knowing, even if it's a dark kind of knowing.
Yeah. That can lead to this sort of spiritual hypocrisy. You see people waving peace symbols linked to their faith while totally ignoring the times their faith wasn't peaceful, the violence, the intolerance in their own history. It's like selective memory.
Spiritual gaslighting almost. Like, here's the nice, clean version, don't look at the messy parts.
Exactly. It avoids the complexity, the contradictions inherent in any big human movement, especially one tied to power and belief.
And how honest are we, really, with ourselves about this?
Yeah.
In our own lives, our own beliefs.
Yeah.
How often do we pick the nice, loving bits and just pretend the other stuff isn't there?
The brutal verses, the awkward commands.
Yeah. What happens to those ignored bits? Do they just vanish? Or do they still shape us somehow, subtly?
You see it play out personally, too. Someone quotes scripture about love, sounds so sincere, and
Yeah. And then they disown their kid for being gay or marrying the wrong person.
Right. So is their religion about peace in that moment? Or have their own biases, their own fears created this other crueler reality that clashes with the ideals they talk about? Which one is the real faith? The words or the actions?
Oof, heavy. Try flipping it completely. Imagine if tomorrow some other religion took over. Totally different rules, different divine laws, suddenly dominant.
Okay.
Would our beliefs, the ones we hold sacred now, suddenly look barbaric, outdated, worthy of being stamped out in the name of their truth? Holy war doesn't seem so noble when you're on the sharp end, does it?
Not at all. And what about the ones who say, my religion is all about peace, but then silence? Utter silence when their own leaders stir up division, or when fellow believers commit atrocities.
That silence. It's loud, isn't it?
It can feel like agreement, can it? Tacit approval, just going along with things, even terrible things. Peace isn't just, not fighting, as maybe Nietzsche would say. It requires active will, striving for something better.
Think about all those good, devout people throughout history. During the Inquisition, during genocides justified by faith, they stood by.
Prayed, probably. Felt pious.
But were prayers enough when actual violence was happening? Evil doesn't always need active villains, right? Sometimes just needs enough people looking the other way.
Which leads to a sort of twist, maybe. What if religion isn't the cause of violence? Or even just the excuse.
What else could it be?
What if? What if it's the ultimate identity marker? The deepest saz. And humans, well, we're fundamentally tribal creatures, always looking for a flag to wave, a banner to defend.
So God, or your idea of God, becomes the biggest flag, the most powerful symbol for your tribe.
Maybe. It's a thought.
And it forces you to ask that divine truth you die for. What if it's really just cultural stories, stuff you soaked up as a kid without thinking?
And that feeling, that intense conviction.
Yeah, that fire in your belly. What if it's just attachment, fear of losing your identity, your community, everything you know?
Even people who think critically, who question things. Often, deep down, there's still this quiet feeling, isn't there? That their path, their way, is the right one. The only really right one.
Is it divine insight or just human psychology being tricky and potentially dangerous?
It's hard to know for sure.
Okay, so let's wrap this part with maybe a slightly painful thought. The most dangerous fundamentalist. Maybe it's not the person reading every word literally.
Who is it then?
It's the one who's absolutely convinced that their interpretation, their take on it is God's own thought, unedited, pure.
Divine ego in human form, lethal.
Exactly. So we end up back where we started. Are some religions inherently violent? Or are humans just brilliant at twisting anything, even God, into a weapon? Maybe the question tells us less about religion and more about, well, us.
Wow. Okay. If this whole deep dive has stirred something up in you, if you're feeling uncomfortable, maybe even a bit angry, that's probably a good sign.
Means you're thinking.
Great. Share this. Talk about it with someone who's willing to wrestle with these big, messy ideas, whatever they believe. These aren't easy chats, but they matter. They really do.
And ask yourself this, seriously. What if devotion isn't measured by how much you love God? What if it's measured by who you're willing to hate in God's name? Love, hate. Sometimes they look terrifyingly similar, don't they?
And ponder this too. What takes more guts? More real heresy, maybe? Questioning a violent verse in your holy book.
Yeah.
Really grappling with it. Or
Yeah.
just obeying it blindly, no questions asked. Where's real faith in that equation?
It's like those endless software agreements, isn't it? We treat scripture like that sometimes. Just click, I agree, without reading the fine print about smiting and damnation.
Yeah, exactly. And try this. Picture God, your God, nodding, approving. As villages burn, as people die, all in his name. Can you really square that image with what you believe is sacred? And if you can, what does that say about your own internal compass?
Okay, let's get practical for a second. Quick self-check.
Yeah.
Name 3 core beliefs from your religion. Got them. Now, name 3 acts of violence, historical or present, done in that religion's name. Hold both sets in your head. How do you manage that? That tension, that cognitive dissonance, that struggle is the real work.
And if you say you're tolerant of all faiths, great. But does that mean tolerating the parts that call for hurting people, whether it's their own followers or outsiders? Tolerance without discernment, it can slide into apathy, or worse, complicity born of fear.
I remember talking to a refugee once. Survived horrific stuff done by people who were outwardly very devout.
Oh, man.
They said they prayed 5 times a day, then they came with machetes. Where was God in that?
In the prayers.
Or in the silence after the screams?
That just cuts right through, doesn't it? It forces you to look at these ethical gray zones. Like, what's the real moral difference between a soldier killing for country and a martyr killing for God, if both truly believe they're serving a higher purpose?
Right. It gets muddy fast. And we all like to think, oh, if I lived back then during the bad times, I would have been a hero.
Sure. Easy to say now.
But look at today. Are there smaller injustices, little bits of discrimination or harm, maybe okayed by tradition, that you see and do nothing about? Heroism, like complicity, starts small.
And here's a thought trap. A religion doesn't have to yell, go kill, to cause violence.
That's all.
Sometimes all it needs to do is create a really strong, sacred us, a chosen few. Because once you have that, anyone outside that circle, to them, they become easier to dehumanize, easier to see as disposable. It's tribalism finding fuel in faith.
And who gets to decide which prophets were real? Which books are the truth? Was it miracles? Or was it? Who had the bigger army? The better writers? Your sacred truth might be someone else's dangerous heresy.
It's all about perspective, isn't it? I used to think questioning religious violence was somehow anti-faith.
Yeah, I get that.
But now,
Right.
I think staying silent about the violence, not challenging the ideas that allow it, maybe that's the bigger betrayal of any God worth believing in.
Voltaire had that cutting line, didn't he? Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
Exactly. And what's more absurd than God giving a thumbs up to bloodshed? We have to question that, especially when people in charge tell us not to, tell us it's sacred, untouchable.
Think about it. There's probably a verse or a story in your faith's background that makes you squirm, that you kind of skip over.
You know the one.
Yeah, that silence, your silence about it, what does that mean? What truth are you maybe sacrificing just to feel okay, to belong?
And be honest. Have you ever stayed in a faith or defended it hard, not because you were 100% convinced, but because you were scared? Scared of losing people, your community, your whole identity. Those bonds of faith, sometimes they feel less like an embrace and more like really beautiful chains.
Maybe the raw truth is just this. No religion is inherently peaceful, and none is inherently violent. There are just texts, and then there are us, flawed, complex humans, interpreting them, using them, driven by love, fear, hope, hate, all mixed up.
So maybe religion isn't the engine or the cure-all. Maybe it's more like a mirror, reflecting back the good and the bad that's already inside us. And sometimes the bad finds a really convenient hook in even the nicest seeming faiths.
And if your faith asks you to switch off your conscience, to just obey, no questions asked, because God said so, at what point is it not your faith anymore? At what point are you just a hostage to it?
Look, we can't just wipe away the history of religious violence. It's there. It's happening now. We can't ignore it. But we do get a choice.
Which is?
Does that violence define faith for us? Or does our fight against that violence define it? Our work to build something better, that's the choice we make.
Final thought experiment. What if tomorrow, undeniable proof, God's not real, just a story, but the community, the morals of your religion, they demonstrably make the world better? Would you keep believing? What are you really devoted to? The idea of God or the results on the ground?
And let's be blunt, those thoughts and prayers for victims of religious violence, they mean absolutely nothing.
Wow.
If you're not also willing to look hard at the doctrines, the interpretations that might have loaded the gun, piety without courage, without action, it's just performance art.
So when people look back at us, at our time, with all this religiously fueled conflict, what will they see? Blind followers. Or people who wrestled with the hard stuff and tried to change things. Your conscience knows the answer.
Maybe true faith isn't about having all the answers neatly lined up. Maybe it's about the struggle, about wrestling with the terrifying questions religion throws at you. Maybe the questioning itself is the most honest devotion there is.
I'll admit, my own feelings about organized religion, they swing back and forth, wildly sometimes. Some days it's beauty, connection, amazing kindness. Other days, all I see is the potential for division, hate, harm. That tension, that contradiction, maybe that's the only honest place to stand. If it were easy, it wouldn't require faith. It would just be a checklist.
We're all trying to figure this out, this minefield of belief and violence. Maybe the only way forward is admitting nobody has the monopoly on truth. Nobody has God figured out completely, especially the ones who claim they do.
So back to the start. Are some religions fundamentally violent? The tough answer might be, any religion can be, in the wrong hands. Or maybe even in any hands if we stop paying attention, stop questioning. That shadow of violence, it seems to linger right near the sacred.
A weaponized God. It's the most dangerous idol there is. And the scariest part, we build it ourselves. Stop praying to the monster.
If something we said really pushed your buttons, made you defensive, go back, listen again. That discomfort, that might be where the real insight is hiding, trying to get through.
Seriously. And if this sparks something, a question, an argument in your head, just unease. Share it. Talk to someone whose faith you admire, someone whose faith maybe scares you. Start the conversation. Ask them what they think. Don't let this be the end. Let it be a beginning.
This has been The Deep Dive. We're not here to tell you what to believe about God, about anything.
We just ask that you never stop questioning why you believe it so fiercely.